you have labor productivity actually going up in these 15 years. It goes up 84%. Now that could be for a variety of reasons because you lay off thousands of people. All these things happen. But labor productivity goes up 84%. Real wages of labor according to the ILO have fallen 22%. If you compare, in every case, in every instance, whichever sector you're looking at education or at health or at farming or at agriculture, you're looking at the multiple divides in your society. You're looking at the multiple divides in your society which are the basis of your exclusion. For me, any talk of inclusiveness has got to start with the issues of exclusion, whether it's gender exclusion or caste exclusion or class exclusion, which is gigantic. A lot of people ask me about caste. Is it not really now restricted to the remote villages? Actually, we've done several analyses right in Mumbai, in South Mumbai and in Central Mumbai. Just caste analysis of the apartment buildings. It's astonishing. It's astonishing how segregated you are as a society, even in urban India. The extent of the divide will surprise a lot of people. There have also been studies showing how many people from different communities actually fly, how many people own credit cards, how many people own automobiles. You'd be astonished at the picture of the caste exclusion that comes about in the caste concentrations that come about in these things. Now, as I said, you have 4 different categories in just the class phase: the landless laborers, the farm, and you have 836 million people living on less than 20 rupees a day. In that, if you're looking at the kind of decline that has taken place, this week, the government of India released its report, the Finance Ministry's report, 3 days ago. Agricultural Committee on Indebtedness, Special Expert Committee on Agricultural Indebtedness, headed by Dr. Radhakrishnan of the IGIDR. Okay? It says, not only what the NSS says, that indebtedness has doubled. It says the pressure on landless is unbelievable. The incomes of farms have collapsed. The NSS also tells you that when the World Bank is defining poverty at $1 a day and 836 million people are living on less than 50 cents, that's one indicator. But the average per capita consumer expenditure of the farm household is now 503 rupees a month, $12 a day, $12 a month. That's it. So you have this fantastic situation of divides in all these cases. How do you start about, whether it's CEO salaries or everything? In every case, one could throw the statistics at you forever. We don't have the time for that. How does then one go about the business of inclusion? Actually, you don't need a committee for it. You don't need another expert committee for it. My recommended reading on this is a particular part of your constitution that has been virtually forgotten. It's called the Directive Principles of State Policy. Okay? Incidentally, because they are not justiciable, nobody makes a noise over the Directive Principles of State Policy. At least 4 Supreme Court judgments, 4 since the 1960s, have said that the Directive Principles of State Policy are no less important than fundamental rights. No less important than fundamental rights. We'll come to that, but since I brought you this newspaper, let me just show you something about inclusion and exclusion. Okay? Here is the first lead. I just picked this paper up on the flight. As you can see, it's got even the tag of so it was picked at random, I promise you. It's got the free airport tag on it. This is a program conducted by the country's largest newspaper, searching for India's leaders. As I said, I believe the media are the most exclusionist of all Indian institutions, far worse than industry. They have chosen leaders. They chose first 64 quarterfinalists. In the 64 quarterfinalists that they chose, I could not find one lower caste person. Their exclusionism was also based on geography. All the 64 finalists were from 8 metros. All. Incidentally, out of all your prime ministers, only one came from a metro, Rajiv Gandhi. He was born in Delhi. He was from Delhi. All your other prime ministers came from villages. All your presidents came from villages, or not from the 8 major metros. They came from places like Guwahati, Fakhruddin Ali Ahmad, Berhampur, in Giri's case, in Rajendra Prasad's case from Bihar. How it is absolutely logical for a paper to assume that leaders of India come from urban India, and that they come from 8 metros. Then if you analyze the last 8 that they have, the final 8 that they have, 6 are Brahmins. Okay? It's not an accident. I mean, I'm not rigging data for you. This is the consciousness level. This is the culture of it. This is the country's biggest, maybe the largest English newspaper in the world. It's there. The same newspaper says gender disparities are growing in business schools. At the same time, the newspaper reflects some of those realities, of those divides of that. In the last 15 years, we have systematically, cynically engineered, ruthlessly engineered and constructed inequality. At that time, it was even argued that it was a good thing. The Economist, by the way, still argues that it's a good thing. A few issues ago, The Economist wrote that, not few issues ago, maybe last year sometime, they wrote that it's a good thing. It engenders competition, it makes aspirations higher, etc. In the 60th year of your independence, it's worth going back and looking at those directive principles of state policy. Here is what the Supreme Court gave in its ruling on the directive principles. It said, yes, by their very nature, the directive principles cannot be enforced in a court of law. This does not mean that they are any less important than fundamental rights. What are some of these directive principles of state policy? I am saying that we can improve the rules at the factory gate level. We can improve the rules between how you treat your workers in a factory. But inclusiveness is a radical transformation of society itself, and that means breaking down exclusion. Here are some of the things that the directive principles say. The state shall strive to promote the welfare of the people by securing and protecting as effectively as it may a social order in which justice, social, economic, and political shall inform all the institutions in the nation. It shall also, in particular, it says these are the words of the Constitution of India drafted. These are not amendments. These are the original draft of the Constitution of India. The state shall in particular strive to minimize the inequalities in income and endeavor to eliminate inequality in status, facilities, opportunities, not only amongst individuals, but also amongst group of peoples residing in different areas or engaged in different vocations. The state shall in particular direct its policy towards that everyone has an inalienable right to livelihood. In the last 15 years, millions of livelihoods have collapsed precisely due to policy. It also says the material control of resources in this country. This is not a Supreme Court ruling, this is the Constitution of India. This is 39B. The ownership and control of the material resources of the community should be so distributed as best to subserve the common good. C, that the operation of the economic system does not result in concentration of wealth and means of production to the common detriment. That there is equal pay for equal work for both men and women. That the health and strength of workers, both men and women, and the tender age of children are not subjected to abuse and exploitation. It goes on, but you can see that all these are the principles we have militated against in the last 15 years. When releasing this constitution on the floor of the parliament or the constituent assembly or whatever you called it at that moment, B.R. Ambedkar put it very simply. He said, now we have built a magnificent political democracy which we threaten to explode with our lack of economic democracy.